So in this video, I'm going to explain one of the most confusing topics for beginners and for more intermediate producers, which is compression. Now, it sent shivers down my spine for about a year of production, so I'm going to go through and explain it in really basic terms for you. That's all coming up. Hey guys, it's John Holt here with The Audio Journey, and welcome to the first ever weekly video on this channel. Now today we're tackling a widely misunderstood and feared topic, which is compression. And I'm going to do that in two steps. I'm going to explain to you what it is, and then I'm going to show it to you in action. Now, compression is a tool that lets you control the volume of something automatically. Now let me explain to you why you'd want to do that. And what I'm going to do is use the example of a vocal recording, because that applies to all genres of music. Now when you take this vocal recording, the difference in volume between the quietest part and the loudest part is called the dynamic range, or the range in dynamics of volume. And vocals by nature have a really large dynamic range. And what that means is that if a vocal is in a song and it's not been compressed, then the loud parts are going to poke out and be really too loud, whereas the quiet parts will get lost underneath the rest of the music. So what we need is a way to even this out. And the way that we do that is we use a compressor. So now that we know what we're using it for, which is to level out the volume of something, let's jump in and have a look at a compressor inside Logic Pro X. Now before we jump in and look at Logic's compressor, I'm just going to go over a couple more definitions so that you know exactly what we'll be doing. Now, compression is a tool to help you make volume more consistent. And what it does is it reduces the difference in volume between the loudest part of the recording and the quietest part of the recording. The difference between these is called the dynamic range, and that's what we're going to be reducing. So how do you actually compress something? Well, you set a volume that you want the recording to stay around, and you do that in decibels, which is a unit of measurement for volume. And then when the vocal goes over that set limit, it gets turned down or compressed. Then finally, you make the quieter parts louder, and this achieves a consistent volume overall. So let's jump into Logic and have a look at the compressor in there. Okay, so let's go in and grab a compressor from our plugins section. And it's going to be under Dynamics because we're reducing the dynamic range. That's the category that it falls under. So, the 5 main controls that I'm going to be going over in this video are threshold, ratio, attack time, release time, and makeup gain. Now, threshold is the volume that you set that you want the vocal or recording to stay around, and when the vocal goes over this, it gets compressed. Now, the ratio allows you to control how much that's compressed. So let's use an example of the ratio 3:1. If the vocal goes 3 dB over the threshold that you've set, it's reduced down to just 1 dB over the threshold. If it goes 6 dB over that threshold, then it's reduced down to just 2 dB, and so on. So the higher the ratio, the more the vocal is compressed. So a ratio of 10:1 means that if the vocal goes 10 dB over, it's reduced down to just 1 dB over, which is a lot of gain reduction. Attack time is the time taken for the compression to take effect, and it's measured in milliseconds. So for example, with an attack time of 20 milliseconds, the compression starts to work 20 milliseconds after the vocal goes over the threshold. And finally, makeup gain is added volume that we apply in order to bring the quieter parts of the recording up after we've brought the louder parts of the recording down to make the volume more consistent overall. Now what I'm going to do is record me talking and then apply some compression so that you can see it in action. Now I'm going to go through the setup quite quickly, so if you want to learn how to do that more in depth, I've got a video on that which I'll link up in the description below. The dynamic range of vocals is very large, so we need to compress it. So here we've got a vocal that has no compression on it. What I'm going to do now is add a compressor and then show you the difference between the two files at the end. you want to make sure the auto gain is off when you start compressing. So we've set the threshold so that we're getting about -5, -3 dB of gain reduction, and that's the amount of compression that's being applied. So when the vocal goes over the threshold, this is it being reduced. We're going to go for a ratio of 3:1. And we want to aim for about -5 in terms of reduction. I'm happy with the attack and release time. And now what we need to do is add a little bit of makeup gain, because we can see that this is a little bit louder than this side, and we want to keep them at an even volume. There we go. So they're the ideal sort of settings for a vocal compression. Now what I'm going to do is exaggerate this a little bit, just so that I can really demonstrate the effect. And with a lot of audio things, it's best to turn it all the way up so that you can see what it's really doing, so that it's really blatant, and then pull it back to a good level. So I'm going to export a really, really compressed vocal, just so that it makes it really obvious what's actually happened. Okay, so what we can see from looking at the uncompressed file compared to the compressed file is that the difference between the loudest parts and the quietest parts is much, much smaller. So we've got a big difference here and a much smaller difference here. So we've sort of chopped the top off almost, compressed that down, and brought these quieter parts up to make them louder and make the overall volume much more consistent. Now I hope this explanation of compression has made sense to you, and if it hasn't, then please leave a comment or get in touch and I'll explain it further for you. If it did make sense, then also please leave a comment and hit the like button. I'd really, really appreciate it. And if it's your first time here, then I'd love to have you subscribe. Also, please share this video with anyone or any group of people that you think might benefit from this explanation. I always say that the best way to learn this skill is to do it with a friend. Collaborate and really push each other to learn quickly and enjoy doing it. And be sure also to grab the free ebook, The 7 Key Elements of Music Production, from the description below. Now I've been John Holt with The Audio Journey, and I hope to see you again soon, and take care.